Alright, let's keep going with our Catwoman. Small adjustments with the move brush, but we're going to hop over into clay and trim dynamic here pretty quick because I really want to get in and start sculpting some of the individual forms. But the last thing I want to do is make sure that these hard surface elements are in line and working. So I'm just arranging the vertices almost as though I would in, say, a program like Maya. Just vertice by vertice, pushing and pulling them, trying to get those hard edges. And then as soon as I've got that done, I'm going to go in, divide this, and then start seeing how the division affects the polygons. So you saw there, it's kind of messing up some of the vertices along the inside of the armpit. But then I'll come in, like I'm doing right now, or like I did, and use relax. So I pressed this little slider, I dragged the slider off to the side, and you can see the lines for how it distributed these vertices differently. So this is going to divide a little better than if I just go in and divide it, right? This vertice, or this guy right here, moved a little bit. These guys spread down the shoulder a little bit, so now this line, this last line basically moved about here, and then they adjusted. And this adjustment really works quite well. It's going to make my life a little easier. You don't have to do it, but it does distribute the polygons a little bit better. So having them distributed makes sculpting them easier. You smooth it out and you're good to go. So divided like this, she's actually starting to look really solid, really nice. But I need to go in and just get some of the essential characteristics of the rib cage, the hip, the head. So one of the things you saw me hit was the lats, and then you saw me put the tensor fascia latae in, and now you see me doing the gluteus medius, maximus, and just making sure that the butt muscles are all working. She looks heroic, and she looks good being heroic. The back muscles, real quick diagram for you. That's the erector spinea, medial and lateral heads, and those are really important. The external oblique going into the rib cage, the pelvic area. I don't draw on the screen, or actually I do draw sometimes on the screen when I'm sculpting, just to get my brain into that mode. But no matter what, my brain is always mentally projecting those shapes. I'm also just seeing if that works for the thigh muscles. You notice I was doing the quadriceps and just making sure that the quadriceps moved into the sartorius. So all of this right now is just me working quickly through some sculpting, or I should say some anatomy notes. The goal is to be putting anatomy notes in. So when you're watching this, it's not important for me to explain every single step. I mean, that would be useful, very useful, but it's not within the scope of something like this time lapse. But watch these over and over, and watch other people sculpt, and look for the things that they do. Look for the lines, like why do I put this line in, behind the knee? What is that line behind the knee? Well, it separates the tibia from the gastrocnemius. How do I put the neck in? Well, the neck starts as a column, and then I go immediately into the sternocleido, then I put the trapezius. But no matter what, I'm just cutting in. I'm trying not to build massive form. Clavicles, these are all nameable things. These are things where if you treat anatomy like a road map, these are the places on the map that I want to go to. Tensor fascia latae, gluteus medius, gluteus maximus, okay, quadriceps, sartorius. Okay, right now I'm writing them all down. So right now I'm doing clavicle, acromion process, head of the humerus, okay, and then I'm putting the bicep in there, drawing it in as this shape. I've got the humerus in its rough, blocked in shape. I put the deltoid and wrap the deltoid over the top of the bicep, the brachialis and the forearm muscles, flexors and all of that. And all of that is in my mind. Here I'm throwing the pectoralis in. It's all in my mind as I'm doing this. Last little thing is really important, that little tricep. You want to build a mental library. Look at the anatomy books. What's visible from a front view? Well, you see a little hint of that tricep. You see the deltoid. You see a little bit of the brachialis down around the bottom, right? So we're seeing a little bit of the brachialis. We're seeing a little bit of the bicep. Look for the overlaps in all of these things. And you'll be able to pull them in later. But ultimately, all of this needs to be happening inside your mind, and you need to be projecting these things, and that's part of what we do to grow, as artists. So when we're thinking about the anatomy, we're putting in our little anatomy notes, but we're not exactly framing it just yet. We are going to, or not frame it, we're not establishing the volume. First step is that you frame it like you're framing a house. Then the next step is you get in there and you start to actually detail and round and create the actual form, which we're going to have to do here shortly with the bicep. So establishing that volume of the bicep, I'm thinking about how it connects to the deltoid, but there's a lot of smoothing and adding volume that goes into this. Clay brush is the primary thing, clay and smooth, and putting in the notes and then going in and fleshing out the form. So you see me alternating. Right now I'm putting in the note that separates the ridge muscles from the flexors. Now I'm putting in the notes that separate the ridge from the tricep, and I'm putting in the note for the the medial tricep head and the long head, all of that. So I'll put the note in by pressing Alt Z sub, and then I'll just add the contouring around there. She's going to get a bit muscular, and I don't find that to be a big problem with her. I want her to be a bit muscular, and then I can dial that back. But right now you'll see me, I'm checking out a couple of different things. This is actually a bug I ran into, or a problem. When I pressed perspective, that grid did not align properly. And the only way I ended up solving that was actually, one, I turned perspective off, but that's not a solution. That's just avoiding the problem, right? That doctor's joke of, hey doc, it hurts here. Well, don't touch it. Or it hurts when I do this. Well, don't do that. In this case, what we want to do, or what I'm going to eventually have to do because of this bug, is just restart ZBrush. So that's the first thing you should always do, is just restart the program and see if that solves it. If it doesn't solve it, then you got to worry. But there are some things that just get solved with the restart. So on to the thighs as I talk away here. And I'm kind of threading the needle of all of these individual forms. It is complex. There is no question about it, but I've moved away from rib cage, clavicle, acromion process to some extent, and I've now moved into the landmarks for pectoralis, arch of the ribs, teres major, deltoid, and then when I get to the deltoid, I'm looking at the different heads, the acromial head, the spine of the scapula portion, the clavicular head. When I get to the arm, right, like I'm doing right now, I'm thinking brachialis, bicep, thinking radiobrachialis, extensor carpi radialis brevis, all of these things, extensor digitorum, extensor carpi ulnaris, making sure I get the carpals, the ulna, all of this stuff. You have to learn so much, and then you have to be able to retain it all. But the way that you retain this, and the way this sticks in your head, is really from doing it endlessly, and doing it often, and taking part in things like this challenge, which this is all about, getting feedback, getting reviews, and developing this internal critic that's able to look at this stuff and start to evaluate, what you're doing right and wrong. You know, those flexor muscles are insanely complicated, but there's really only 4 of them, you know, that you got to worry about. But the form is quite intense. You see me here right now with trim dynamic, establishing some planes. And this is something that I could have done with the move brush. It's something that would be done in conjunction with move brush perhaps. But I started out with the move brush and then I moved into clay and trim dynamic. Sometimes I just go straight into clay and trim dynamic. And evaluating this process, my brain works better with clay and trim dynamic. And so we'll see that happening in this next video as well.